Daniel, tell us about yourself. Give us your full name and a little
Yeah,
bit about your personal life and who
yeah,
you.
totally. So my name is Daniel Weinzoff. I'm 37 years old. I live in Bergen County, New Jersey. I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for 12 years, special education. I taught 7 years in New York City, 4 years in the Bronx, and 3 years in East Harlem. And I'm currently teaching in West New York in New Jersey at a middle school. So yeah, 12, I have a wife named Jennifer, and I don't know if you knew this. I have a newborn son. Well, he's not new anymore. June 1st, my wife gave birth to a son called Luca.
Wow!
Jean, yeah, you probably didn't hear, but
Congratulations!
thank you. Here, yeah, I don't know here's a picture of him,
Wow!
my little man.
Fourth generation. Here we are.
Yeah, so his name's Lucas Jean-Claude Weinzoff.
Beautiful.
Since my brother named his boy after grandpa, we named Luca's middle name after my wife's grandpa, who also passed away.
Oh,
Um, so it's a Haitian name, but yeah, so we're just trying to keep the tradition alive.
that's great.
Um,
That's great.
yeah, so my parents are Dahlia and Wayne Weinzoff. Yeah, Dahlia is the daughter of Benjamin Niger, and the connection to the whole Niger, that whole clan, Huberts, McCormicks, all of them. And my dad is Wayne. He, yeah, I don't ever talked about my dad's side, but yeah, a lot of his family lived in Florida at the time. I think they were all in Long Island, moved to Florida, so I was really mostly closer with my mom's side. That's kind of like what who we did holidays with. Um, so yeah, I have two siblings, Andrew and Stacy, older sister, younger brother. They have kids. Stacy has three kids, girls, and Andrew has two kids, one boy, one girl. So
Nice big
six
family.
grandchildren, yeah, from my parents.
It's great for them. Yeah.
Yeah. They
So
kind of
you're
mess around. They call Luca like number five because it's like, it's a lot.
you're third generation survivor.
Yeah.
Tell us about your family members who survived the Holocaust.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm mostly closer my whole life with my mom's side, who that's where the survivors were. So, my mother's father, my grandpa, was a sibling of four other girls and five together, and they survived. Um, Also, I don't know if you know this, Aunt Sesha's husband, Uncle Mark,
Yes.
he was also a survivor, and he was in, I think he was in Buchenwald, so didn't escape. He was liberated. So he had, he, I didn't really hear much stories from him. I heard a few through the grapevine, none through his own mouth, but I've heard a few things of
Yeah.
what he went through as well.
Yeah.
Which if you want to, I heard one story really that I remember, but so yeah, so my mom's side are all Holocaust survivors, um, and it was just that whole side of the family was very close growing up as a child. We always had Hanukkah parties together, um, Passover Seders together at Uncle Mark's house. It was growing up and like everyone was together. So, the cousins were together, aunts, uncles were together. So, that's who I was around growing up. So,
And
um,
your mother's
yeah,
side of the family, your grandpa and your great aunts who
yeah,
survived together, uh,
yeah,
their parents, your great grandparents.
yeah.
Tell us about them.
Okay, so yes. So Grandpa Herman, I've never met. I think he passed away in Germany. I think Grandpa was living, he told me the story. He was living in the States at the time, and they got word that he was sick and he went over there. I don't know if he made it over there before he passed, so I never met him. But Grandma Sarah lived in the house in Upper Saddle River where we moved. So my parents used to live in Brooklyn for like 30 years, and when we moved to Upper Saddle River, New Jersey, Uncle Mark and Sesha were living in Upper Saddle River, New Jersey at the time, and that's why my parents moved there because they were looking for a nice New Jersey town. And I think Aunt Sesha was working at a hospital in New Jersey. So when I was a kid and we would go over there, uh, my parents worked, when we were younger, we spent a lot of time there. Grandma Sarah was actually still alive, living at their house. So
Wow.
I was young, I remember her face, I don't, she was always like in bed, she must have been in her 90s, late 80s and 90s, but yeah, she lived in that house for years before she passed away. I don't remember exactly when she did, but I definitely knew her for, I want to say, like when we moved to New Jersey, maybe 5 years.
Well,
I think she lived. I don't remember when she passed. I think she lived in her mid 90s. I'm pretty sure.
that's great. That's great that
Yeah,
you got to know her a little bit.
yeah. I spent
So
some time.
where were your family from originally?
Which family?
Your
Have had family?
the survivors, the ones that survived the Holocaust.
Want to go all the way back?
Yeah, as far as back as you want to go.
Okay, so no, so Grandpa's family was born in Krakow, and I don't know if I told you the story that Grandpa took me to Krakow. Did I tell you? I think we talked about that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I went with him, just me and him. So my first few years of teaching, in the summer I didn't work the first 2 years. I was like, Grandpa, let's go on a trip, and he wanted to take me. And Grandpa's very last minute. We'll talk about that later, but he ended up taking me the third summer, and we went, and he showed me, where they were from. He showed me where he was born. So yeah, so we can get to that later, but they were lived in Krakow till they were Grandpa was 11. That's I don't they lived in the Jewish quarter. I know they went to synagogue. He showed me the synagogue that they went to. I think there was like a lot of Hasidic Jews there, but I think they were religious, but there was a very strong Jewish community there, where everyone knew everyone, everyone took care of everyone. And
yeah,
Grandpa was just a little boy there. There
yeah,
were, he told me that they had a lot of aunts and uncles, a lot of extended family too in
yeah,
Krakow. That obviously he never saw again after the war,
yeah.
just his immediates. But yeah, that's where it originated. And I'm trying to think how far back they go in Krakow. Grandpa Herman and Grandma Sarah. But yeah, it originated there, and then you know the story of the war. But yeah, they ended up actually moving back to Germany after the war. Grandpa lived in Munich. I'm trying to think that, yeah, but I don't remember exactly. But um, yeah, no, Grandpa. Sorry, he went Krakow and then had the war, and then I don't know if he went back to Germany or then he went to Israel and then he ended up going back to Germany, I think, to go back to school. But yeah, I'm rambling now, but
Okay, so for people who don't
yeah,
know the story,
yeah.
tell us what you know about how they got out of Krakow.
Okay, so yeah, they were, it was just kind of obviously the wrong place, wrong time. They were in Krakow when the Nazis invaded Germany, uh, Nazis invaded Poland, sorry, in 1939. They were moved from their housing to the Krakow ghetto, and during that time, either Jews were being shipped off to concentration camps or they were just being exterminated in the ghettos. They survived miraculous, different scenarios where they faced death. They seen their loved ones, like cousins, in piles of bodies. Grandpa always said, yeah, the story of the butcher. I always talk about the story of the butcher from the film. And Grandpa always told me that story. And there's one part that wasn't he didn't really say in the movie that he always told me, and I wanted to tell you that. So I'll if you want really quickly,
Sure.
the housing unit that they were in, they were starting to exterminate, and unfortunately, they were in like the last unit, and they exterminated everyone in the housing complex. And when they opened the door for the guy came in to, they were the last ones to be exterminated. I don't know. Grandpa always told me that in the movie he says that he's a little boy. He doesn't want to die. He's so young, but what he's told me is that like he told me. the fear that he had in that moment, he told me he would never wish it upon his worst enemy. And I'll never forget that what he told me. And when you're looking down the barrel of a gun and you know you're going to die in the next second, and then it didn't happen, and but he said how scared he was. That was probably the scariest moment, the scariest thing he's ever experienced in his entire life. And I'll just never forget him telling me that.
Yeah.
And I think about it a lot,
Yeah.
just, you're waiting for something, life to be over and you don't know what's going to happen, what's going to feel like, literally terrified beyond imagined. And what happened was that some soldiers came out, and whispered something into the guy who was doing the exterminating's ears, and they left the building,
Yeah.
and they weren't killed. And yeah, he just that story always kind of resonates in my mind. But what he told me about the fear that he felt in that moment, I'll always remember.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty amazing. How just as full disclosure for anybody who's watching, I had made a film about uh, Danny's family called They Survived Together, and Danny is the grandson of Benjamin Niger, who is one of the main characters of the documentary. So that's how this discussion is flowing right now. So yeah, that's really, I mean, it must be really hard for you to think about that. I mean, I know you were very, very close with your grandpa, and how does it make you, I mean, how often do you think about it, and how does that make you feel that he went through such horrors?
It's hard, just being around him. You could always tell that it affected him. You could see it. He would always tell me that whatever 90 years, he's 90 years old, but like 80 years after the war, he still has nightmares about it. It still lives with him. He's told me that it never stopped. His whole life, it never stopped. So it's. He lived with that trauma every day, and I won't say he had a tough life, but it was just something that he really tried to move on from. And definitely, you could the way he lived his life, you could tell that he knew he was on borrowed time, and he kind of lived life the fullest that he could. And I'll always look up to him in that way, but you could tell that it never left him. And he wouldn't really talk about it unless you asked him, and then he would openly talk about it. But you could just tell that um, it affected who he was. Um,
Yeah. So
you know,
we know that your grandfather Benjamin Niger, he went through this incredible experience, escaping from Krakow, and then the long journey that it took him to finally be liberated. In fact, he was lost in a woods for a long time, and
mhm.
finally found by his parents and reunited with the family, and it's just an amazing saga. Um, tell us a little bit about what he did after the war.
Yeah. So it's funny. I was talking to my mom this morning, and um, I had just asked her some questions before we had our talk, and um, I don't know what happened after he was. I have to read his book, just a little section. But after they reunited again, there was some time before that we have to look into before he went to go to Palestine. So I know that they reunited with the family, and I guess they lived a few years, and then he decided to go to Palestine or Israel now, and he ended up fighting for Israel in the War of 1948 for Israel's independence. I think he was 17, um, so he was on his own. I think he knew how to speak Hebrew, but He was able to move up in the ranks in the army because he knew how to shoot a gun. Because at the in the in the woods in the cabin, the Russian soldiers kind of showed him how to shoot. So when they were kind of when they were saying, oh, training people how to shoot, he already knew how to shoot. So he got promoted to like, I think he said a sniper, and they put a scope on his. And I don't know if he ever told his story, but I think he did a mission in Egypt where they were like sneaking up to a Egyptian base, and his job was to, sn be a sniper and take people out. And as the story goes, is that he couldn't do it. I would say like he's always been like a pacifist in his own way,
Yeah,
but he looked at his target and he just he in his mind he's like, does this person have a family? Does he have he started to go through all these things, and it's one thing he told me that if you're in battle and someone's shooting at you, just survive. You need to shoot back, but to
sure.
like sneak up on someone and try to
Yeah,
take someone's life when they don't know you're there, he couldn't do it.
yeah.
So I think it real yeah.
I've heard that before from other survivors who ended up in the Israeli War of
Mhm.
'48. But
So it just showed you who Grandpa really was,
yeah.
and
So tell us about the so
yeah,
you touched on the story of where he learned to shoot.
yeah,
After they escaped from the Krakow ghetto and they were on a journey, they kept being chased away from town to town. Uh,
yeah.
the Nazis came closer, and then he was exiled into a woods. What do you know about that story?
So yeah, so they were in a town, and the Nazis were coming, and my grandpa Herman knew that if they saw that Grandpa and Grandpa Herman were circumcised, they knew that they would both be Jewish, and then they would be taken away to concentration camps. So Grandpa Herman took Grandpa into the woods, found a cabin. I don't know if there were soldiers there yet, but left him there saying, I'm gonna come back for you. I don't know how long, but so Grandpa, I think I don't know if the soldiers came after, but spent some time, weeks with the soldiers. They kind of took care of him, showed him how to shoot, they ate food, but then the soldiers had to move out, go to a different part, and they left Grandpa there. And I believe they left a German Shepherd with him, and Grandpa was by himself. Was it 12 years old in the woods by himself in a cabin? And he would, he would tell me personally. He told me stories about this, and in the movie, you could tell that he experienced trauma in the ways that he thought his parents were coming back. He was waiting every day to see when his dad would show up, and I think when they never did, I think that kind of you know that he definitely struggled with that. You could hear at the end of the movie that his parents left him almost like for dead, and it really affected him. But he would tell me personally how hard that was, just trying to survive. The winters were cold. He said he had only like a few matches, to eat food, to cook food and stay warm, and then the matches were gone. And then he was literally going into ponds and like taking fish and eating them raw because he hasn't eaten in like 2 days. And
Yeah,
he would always tell me that, people, think they're hungry and they're famished, they haven't eaten, and but he's like, you don't know what real hunger is. He would
yeah.
always tell me that people feel a little hungry and oh my God, it's a big deal. But he literally told me he went 2 days without eating to the point where he caught a raw fish and just had to eat it.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, it's amazing, and that's why, we do these kind of things, like have these kind of conversations and interview people, especially like, the survivors themselves, because what they went through, we can never even imagine, in our lives.
it's
And
not even, yeah,
even our imaginations, and even just talking about the stories is one thing. It's hard, and it's very important to pass down, but what happened to them and how they were hurt internally, It's just it's something that will, that we can't understand as you know,
Right.
as friends of theirs, as relatives of theirs, So
We could read all the stories and watch all the movies, but we could see the impact, but to experience it firsthand, it's like you said, it's just you can't even understand.
so what was what did he do after the we're talking about Danny's grandfather, Benjamin Niger. What did he do after the war? After
So
the
at
after the Israeli.
Israeli war, yeah. So I think he went back to school, and I think he went back to Germany to study electrical engineering and nuclear physicist. But he was also learning. Was he learning English at the time? Yeah. But yeah, he went to move to Munich. He was studying there. He also, as well, took me to Krakow. He took me to Munich as well with my brother. So I got fortunate to go to Europe twice with him. And yeah, he took me to Munich. Uh, he told me a lot of stories about that. My mom was born in Munich. I think she was one. Um, Wait, let me date back. I'm sorry. Wait, he met my grandma in Israel. Sorry, he was young. Uh, yes, they met in Israel, and then they got married in Israel, and then they moved to Germany to kind of start a life. Yes, that was it. I'm sorry. And yeah, they lived in Germany. My grandpa went to school. He started to work. Um, what else? My mom was born 1961, and then they moved to the States. But I Grandpa told me a story once where uh, I, he worked for I don't know what company it was. He was doing maybe some electrical engineering. He was in a factory or and he told me his office was in the basement. And he told me that one day he just wasn't feeling well. Like he had a headache, and so he went home early. And he found out later that day that something happened in the office where there was I don't know if it was like a fire or like an oil spill or something happened dramatically where a lot of the office was destroyed and a lot of people didn't make it, and it was just what happened that it was he just didn't really feel well that day, and he was home. And there's a lot of stories like that Grandpa told me that I think you know after the war it kind of changed his perspective on life. I think his book is called My Nine Lives, and you could tell that a lot of different experiences where he kind of I don't want to say like cheated death, but just he survived a lot of different really tough things and shaped who he was. And we can talk
Yeah,
about that later about how he influenced me. And but
yeah.
yeah, so yeah, it's just incredible. You can't, you
And
know,
so he went on to uh have a lot of patents and inventions and
yeah.
interesting things like that. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Grandpa, he was kind of like an electrical genius. This is true story. I would literally be sitting in his apartment and he would have this board. And I'm just sitting watching TV and he's fiddling around on this electrical board with all these what are they called? Circuits, and just moving stuff around. And a huge like fireball shot across his apartment. And I was just looking, I'm just like, and his mind just never stopped. He was brilliant in ways that we can't even imagine. He was able to think like beyond dimensions that we can. And
Yeah.
I didn't even know how. So some of his patents, I believe his one of his patents was the smoke alarm, like the most original ones. I think his company Leviton has the patent. So he worked for an electrical company called Leviton. So he was like the creative guy on Leviton who would start. They would give him, pay him to create new things, electrical things, and I believe it's the smoke alarm, dimmer switches on lights. So like you could dim a light. He did that. I heard in a bowling alley the reset button. I heard that too.
Oh my
But
God,
you could Google his name. There's probably a ton more, but he
that's
just
amazing.
had a way of thinking. He loved to invent things. Like he just had a very creative mind, and oh, I wish he would tell me so many different ones. I'm blanking now, but he would have random ones. We would just be in the apartment, and he'd be like, "What do you
Yeah.
think about this idea? What do you think
Oh,
about this?" It would just never. His mind didn't stop to the moment he passed away. It was just he had a very very active mind.
what that brings to mind to me is that he survived and was able to go on and do these incredible inventions that are part of our everyday life, and I'm sure which led to much more innovative things that we're just take for granted now. uh,
True.
that's just one survivor, and all the people that didn't survive, all the great minds that we lost is
Yeah.
from the Holocaust is just it's just so tragic. Saying that is an understatement, but it's just one example of one person who survived and was able to do these extremely interesting and beneficial to society.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, do you remember the first time you heard about the Holocaust, or for the first time you understood what the Holocaust was? Did you learn about it in school, or how did you learn about it?
That's a good question. I was trying to think about this question a lot, and I think had to be like fourth, fifth grade, 12, 11, and I don't know if it was Hebrew school that started it, or I remember um, in grade school, I must have been what fourth, fifth grade. I said my sister Stacy. I heard from the grapevine that grandpa there was like she was doing a project on Europe. I don't know the war. I don't know the details of it, but grandpa came in and talked about the war, and we were little kids. We were little kids, and I heard about that. So when it was I was in fourth and fifth grade, and we were doing a European project, and I chose Germany, Poland, whatever. I called Grandpa up, and he's like, "Yeah, of course." So Grandpa comes into my fourth, fifth grade class and literally tells his stories, and I was a little kid, and I never forget my teacher. Her face just lit up, and how incredible that was. And I didn't really think twice about it because, Grandpa was always like larger than life when I was a kid like that.
Yeah,
But yeah, I guess that was the earliest, and I heard it through his eyes. I knew about it, I knew about the family, but, that's really,
that's really like the first time it became real to you in a way.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It was almost just like, I have this amazing grandpa, who's willing to come in and do these things. And, everyone in the class was so infatuated with him, and he was a great storyteller as well.
yeah.
So it was that was really the earliest, and you
But
know,
did you have so you grew up in a religious Jewish family?
um, observant. I was called religious. We're observant. We went to the high holidays on temple. I went to Hebrew school.
Yeah, yeah,
We used to go to Hanukkah's house for Hanukkah parties, and we used to go to Uncle Mark's house for Passover, and then I used to be at the water club, and just like
yeah.
the big stuff. We weren't really going to temple on the weekends, but it was more family and being together and things like that.
Did anti-Semitism ever come into your life as a kid?
I'm trying to think. I guess not so much until I got older. Not as a kid, I don't think so. Maybe when I was in school, and there was like a group of like 10 Jewish kids in school, and I might have heard some name calling from other kids. There's like a few kids who would say names, but
Yeah,
yeah, that was, I don't know, not really so much.
yeah.
Obviously, in recent times, definitely, but as a kid, I don't really remember that much.
Right, right. And so what was your relationship like with your grandfather? Your personal relationship? You guys had a special bond.
Yeah. As a kid, Grandpa was always off doing his thing. I would hear stories he's in Europe, and I would just, he would come to all the family gatherings. I'll never forget. We used to live in Brooklyn, and we used to go to this beach club, and Grandpa would show up on his motorcycle to the parking lot. All the kids would come to the parking lot, and we'd give each kid a turn, ride around the parking lot on a motorcycle. Like that was just grandpa. Like he was just like this larger than life guy. When we were like 12 or 13, he got his pilot's license, and he would take us in his little Cessna airplane, or it was a Piper airplane. He would took us 10 times probably, and that definitely influenced me because I always after that loved aviation. I pursued flying. We always that was something we always connected on was
Wow.
that flying. I pursued it on my own, but going up with him at 12, 13, he'd fly us around the Statue of Liberty, and
Wow.
he was like this cool. He had like the aviators, he had the jacket. It was just like he was Top Gun.
Amazing.
And then yeah, we really got close. Really when I got moved into the city. It was like 2012. I got a teaching job in the Bronx. I literally lived 84th and First. He was on 86th and Second, and you know, I, yeah, he was like the closest. My brother lived in the city, but I don't know. I just started spending a lot of time with him. I can't explain. He was like the closest person I had. I've always been, close with him, but it was just like we really started to spend a lot of time together. And it would go from, I go to work and then, we hang out after work. I don't, his wife at the time, Alexandra, was out, was gone. So it was just me and him a lot. And I don't know, we just sat and talked for a while, forever. We would talk about everything. We watched tennis and we watched the soccer tournaments. And I don't know, he's just like the only person where like I literally could sit and talk with him for hours about anything. It's just and I'll never forget after COVID, I didn't see him for like a year and a half. He was down in Florida, and I came up and I didn't see him so long, and literally we just sat and we chatted for I don't even know. It was definitely a long, long time, but
Do you think uh, can you feel or see an influence on your life as a man now,
of
and
course,
that he had on you?
of course.
What are some of those things that you think you learned or picked up from your grandfather
There,
family?
there's so much I couldn't so I but it's just him his appreciation for living and life after what he went through was the biggest lesson I could ever learn from him because he would always tell me how precious life was and how important every day is. Like grandpa would live his every day to the fullest. He always told me let's just live like he didn't know if tomorrow was promised to him. He knew that. Like that was his kind of his mantra. And, he always joke around that, he always did everything last minute. He didn't want to make plans ahead of time because he just didn't know, what tomorrow brings. He always joked that he wouldn't even buy green bananas because he didn't know when the bananas were ripe, if he'd be around or not. That was his big joke. But even when I want to go to Europe, it took me 3 summers, and then literally 2 weeks before the trip, he booked it. Like I've been waiting for how many summers now, and he was always just like he lived in the moment, and it's we always talk, people talk about that. That's how you find true happiness, not worrying about the future or the past. Is like really living in the moment. And Grandpa was the example of that. And I think his you know his almost not making it in the war and a lot of other things, he did almost not make it made him really appreciate life. And he'd always tell me how lucky we were that, this is what he would tell me exactly that, a billion atoms came together. All of our parents came together. Billion atoms came to make you. That's what he would tell me. And, it's an incredible miracle that we're here. And that's, verbatim, but so I always try to live by that.
Yeah,
He was larger than life. We always call him James Bond. He'd fly airplanes and ride motorcycles and go scuba diving, and it's just kind of like he just wanted to enjoy everything that life had to offer.
Yeah.
And so, I try to live like that, so yeah, I do miss him, and just learning from him really, and just spending time with him is,
That's
you
great.
know,
That's great.
yeah,
It's a true blessing. And again,
yeah,
going back to what I said before, it's because he was a survivor
yeah,
that that you were here and that your mom is here and
yeah. We wouldn't be here without him. With what he went through, how strong he was, we would not be here.
I know he had a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
Do you think and you don't have to get too personal about this, but do you think trauma gets passed down through generations?
I think so. I think so. I think you know, I think it gets passed down by generations. Grandpa ended up after having a family going on his own, and definitely I knew that my aunt, uncle, and mom were almost traumatized from that, and
Yeah,
definitely that gets passed on, and
yeah,
to us, and it's just internally hard, to think about what they went through. And you're almost living your normal life, and like, you have everything you have, and you can't, and you just think about everything that was taken away from them, and almost, almost everything. But
yeah,
and it affects you, it definitely, it humbles you. But you know even as a third generation, it's like, you're not the same. I've seen him struggle in certain, in certain situations, and I feel it. I definitely feel it. So it definitely gets passed down.
yeah. I mean, I remember when I first met your grandpa, and when I was meeting him on the street, and I would see him coming from a distance, and I would think, he's walking quietly by himself, but he's carrying this around in his head,
Mm,
whole incredible experience of the Holocaust. He's
yeah.
still in New York City. We're gonna meet for lunch, but
Hmm.
he's got this in his head. And
Yeah.
your mother, by proxy, by being his daughter, she
Hmm.
knows that, she feels it, and you too. And
Yeah.
of course, it came over to me. You know,
Yeah.
all of our brains are getting,
Yeah.
are thinking about this.
Yeah.
And we all have our own visuals of it. But I always used to think, boy, I feel bad for this guy to have to carry this around.
Hmm.
So, um,
Yeah. I like, you don't ask about, unless you want to know stuff. He doesn't really talk about it, but you could definitely like feel it around him, and just it's just like this, you know, it's like this heavy thing that, is always there.
yeah. So, as you mentioned before, we're almost, 80 years from the Holocaust, and yet it's still, you and I are talking about it right now. Um, it's still a very important topic. It's still very present in a lot of people's lives. Um, what are your feelings on how the Holocaust should be thought about or remembered, or you know, um, how should it live in society today?
Sonny, I actually have to think about that firsthand because I'm a teacher. And
Yeah,
when you teach middle school, Holocaust is a mandated topic. It's a standard. You have to do Holocaust studies. So it's like, I try. It's like I have to pivot every year because, I play your movie to the kids at some point. They've all seen it,
oh wow,
but it's like trying to get kids to relate, or people to relate to it, to make them understand. They're very into war and things like that. So I try to incorporate a lot of reasoning behind it. World War II, why would someone do this, or how can human beings do this to other human beings? So it's like I try to wrap it around that, around history.
Yeah.
But it's 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 very hard to make the next generation understand. It's I've tried it for years now as a middle school teacher where I have to do this, and they want us to read to them some segments of Anne Frank, and it's you know as we talked about, we have a hard time grasping what Grandpa went through, but even describing it to my students, they can't put themselves in their shoes of, oh, of what genocide really is. They could. So it's hard, but I really try to talk about my family a lot about it. Obviously I showed them the movie, and they they need they need to it's like they need to learn about it. It's something that should never be forgotten or not known about. So
Yeah. Yeah,
you know
it's really interesting to me, and I think about it a lot because I work in this field, and
yeah,
I mean that it's in the it's under the umbrella sort of World War II in
yeah,
history, but it also lives very much on its own, uh,
yeah,
historically, and there's so many complex issues that go along with it, that you really I just hope people read more about it and learn more about it, than just one part of World War II and
yeah.
just something that happened, to
It's I'll never forget how I really connected with him when I went to Krakow with Grandpa, and the camps were like an hour drive, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm here. I should just go because who knows if I'll come be back here. So Grandpa didn't want to go with me. He's like, I don't want to experience that again, but he said, I think you should go. So it's like a tour, they pick you up or whatever, and we go, and you know they show you like a picture of all the people lining up by the when they get pulled off of the train, and you're standing where they actually were, and it's just like it's like you almost have to have those types of experience to really feel like what it was like in their shoes. And I'll never forget that when you walk along the train, right? And it was like their last walk before they went to the gas chambers. Like they literally got off the train, they lined up, and like they walked down to the chambers. And like I literally did that walk. And I'm walking down, I'm looking at the sky, looking at everything. I was like, wow, like this is what the last thing these people saw.
yeah,
And it's almost like I think Hebrew schools do this, but they take trips there, and I feel like you need to be there in that presence of
yeah,
that place to really understand and feel those feelings. And so I don't know if I would do it in my middle school, but like if I ever taught like in a Hebrew school, like I would
yeah,
100% go and do that, because that was that's what the new generation needs to do. It
yeah.
was it was definitely, yeah.
Does it connect you more to Judaism, or as a identity?
Definitely, yeah.
Tell me about
Um,
that.
so it's a part of you. Yeah, of course. How do I explain this? Um, I took a few Holocaust studies courses in college, and it's just it's a part of you. These people, this happened because to these people because they were Jewish, something that they were born into that they had no control over, and this happened to us. So it's it kind of it makes you feel like you need to keep going as a religion. And it's we just had the high holidays, and it just on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, like I feel weird if I'm not with my dad in synagogue on those days. It's like it's one of those things where it's like if it's weird if I'm home, that's where I need to be. So it shapes you. I yeah, it definitely strengthens your religion and wanting to continue it.
Yeah. Um, we discussed the documentary They Survived Together, which I made with my partner Andrea at Redmond, and had the honor of working with your family and telling the story of your grandfather and his sisters, Sesha, Hanka, Basha, and Tosha. And when you saw the film, how did it make you feel?
Definitely emotional. Um, it told the story of our family, which I just want to say thank you so much for doing. I mean, to have that film now forever, I'm forever that it's indescribable. To hear them talk about it, have it being recorded, and the way you put it together was beautiful, beautifully done. It's really emotional. Every time I watch it now or I show my students it, I get a little I get choked up in the back of the classroom. But it just means so much to us. We knew the story existed, but no one really told it. Grandpa wrote his book, Basha wrote the children's book, but to put it on film, it was just really, really powerful. And you know,
Yeah,
it just makes me miss all of them so much, especially Grandpa. But we're all proud of it, proud of you, thanking you, proud of you for doing it. But it makes us proud as a family,
one of
that we
the
had that documentary.
one of the things that you just touched upon or before about that you felt like you had to be there with your family for Rosh Hashanah and
Mm,
the sort of the holding that tradition together and as in our discussion we were saying as it relates to the Holocaust and and your identity as a Jewish person. When I was making the film, I thought that your family um, and their survival was like a microcosm for the Jewish culture.
hmm
That you know they survived, and we're all lucky that they survived, and and the Jewish faith survived the
hmm
Holocaust too. You know,
Right.
they didn't win. They killed an extremely amount of great people, but they didn't win in getting rid of Judaism and
Yep.
Jewish people. So I always thought that from the very beginning that that's what I wanted to kind of carry through that film. So
hmm
yeah, so it's very interesting and it's very important to continue that with your
And
family.
also, like, the strength of family.
Yeah,
You know, they gave each other the strength to get through that.
yeah.
You know, so
Um,
yeah.
I This is a little bit off subject, but are there any other Holocaust films that you have seen that you like?
So one that really, like, I'll always remember, and I think it was in Hebrew school. I don't know how old I was. It was a serious movie, like seventh grade, eighth, before bar mitzvah. I don't know. It was called The Devil. Is it called the Devil's Advocate? No, Devil's Arithmetic. It
Yeah,
was with Kristen Dunst. It's a book. It was a book, but they made it into a film. They showed it to us in middle school, and I'll just, they were at it was either a Seder, and the main character, like, I don't know, she has like too much to drink, she passes out, and all of a sudden she wakes up in, I don't know which town, but in almost like grandpa in, like, Krakow, and she's like her grandma's friend, and pretty much she's living the life of when the Nazis came, when she went to the concentration camps, and she almost like she lived, experienced exactly what kind of like grandpa went through, minus the concentration camps. with her grandma. She was like the friend of the grandma, and um, when the movie ends is when she started to get sick, so they sent her to the to the gas chamber, and and they showed like inside the gas chamber when it was about to happen, and then then she like woke up from her dream.
Yeah, it's
I
interesting.
don't know if you saw it, and she went to her grandma, and she's like she experienced it, and she started saying all this stuff to her grandma, and her grandma's like, "How do you know this stuff?" She was
Yeah,
saying the name and that, and that was that movie. I haven't seen it in I don't know 20 years, but that movie really resonated with me. I don't know why, 25 years later, I still think about it a lot.
it speaks of what we were talking about, like of the passing it down through the generations and passing the
Yeah,
memories down, you know. Very interesting.
yeah.
Uh, is there anything else you want to add about your family or your?
It was just a wonderful childhood. It's just I like in the movie they were always just laughing and enjoying themselves and each other. It was really just all about family. And I was always very closer with that side of the family. Like Sesha's son cousin Dan Maria. They took me to my first like Grateful Dead show when I was 16. My mom let me take my finals early sophomore year, and I just went off with them for like for a week. And we moved to the same town as Uncle Mark and Aunt Sesha, and I was like 8 years old, and I would be at their house all the time. And cousin Dan, they would, Maria would, their housekeeper would be cooking chicken soup, and their dog Sayad, and it's like that was my childhood. I was just around all of them.
Yeah.
Um,
So tell me,
you know,
who are your aunts and uncles?
that side of the family.
Yeah,
Wait, I
yeah.
understand.
Just list who your aunts and uncles are for
No,
them.
so no, my mom's siblings, my uncle Matthew and Aunt Daphne Niger, and Matthew Niger, and then they have cousins, Sesha's kids who are Danny Hubert and Matthew Hubert,
Right.
and then there's Basha had Raymond, and Tosha had Kate and Sean. So it's a big family. So right, like they're good. So it's
Get
just
them all.
that was who that was. We were all together growing up. Like so all the holidays. I was always at Aunt Sesha's house. Just hanging out while my parents were working, and they were taking care of me. So it was really a wonderful, and spend the last 10 years with Grandpa, literally almost every day with him, and just
Yeah,
it was a really wonderful childhood with them. So um, it was I know they went through a lot and they had a lot of trauma, but just like grandpa's zest for life, they kind of all had that. So
yeah.
it was just a really wonderful group to be around growing up.
I remember when I would go and meet your grandfather for Andrea and I would go meet your grandfather for, and I always tell the story at our screenings that we would go, he would say, "Come on up and we'll go out to lunch," and we go up to his favorite diner on the Upper East Side, and Honka would be there, and Basha would be there, and we'd go over and get Sesha
Hmm.
out of the senior home, and
Yeah, yeah.
Basha would be there. I'm like and it just we had so many lunches together
Hmm.
with all of them, and I was just always amazed at how they just always wanted to be around each other. It
I have a
was
funny story. My mom took over the Laka party years ago. So it was in New Jersey, right? And I think we were going back to the city. So it was Grandpa, it was Tosha and Hanka, and my wife was there. And we were driving them home back into the city because we were the rides. They did not stop laughing the entire drive home. I don't even know what they were cackling about. You could ask my wife about it, but it was so funny. They were just like, it was like they were like little kids again.
yeah,
So that's really what it was,
yeah.
who they were. So
Isn't that wonderful that you have that memory and you had
yeah,
those experiences? So I think that's a good place for us to end. Um,
perfect.
I thank you so much for being a part of this show. The
Thank you.
show's called Descendants, and it's part of my new nonprofit called Their Stories Foundation, and we're going to continue doing more shows like this. But thank you, Danny, for being part of the first show.
Thank you, John. It was my pleasure. I had so much fun.
And yeah, stay in touch. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Okay, take care.
Thank you for everything.